All right, welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Better Fishing with Two Bald Biologists. How you doing, Ben?
I'm doing well. As you guys can see, much has changed.
Yeah, for those of you that are looking at us online, we have a new studio, got a new sign behind us. It's kind of bright, but probably reflects off of our bald heads a little bit, but that's okay. So you've been fishing in the last little bit?
No, I've been building a studio, as you can see.
Whatever.
Look, all this is Corey's doing. All this is also proof that I can follow directions. So that's basically all I did for about a day.
Well, I mean, it worked out. It at least looks okay. So I'm satisfied with it if you are.
I think it's great, and I just want to let y'all know this table
It's not a podcast table.
It's not a podcast table, but that's not where I was going with that. This table is in way more pieces than you think it is.
Yeah.
It came in a box about the size of a shoe box.
And
maybe not that bad. But.
And when you're 90% done with it and you realize you've put pieces on backwards, does not make yourself happy.
This was not the table to assemble at 5 o'clock in the afternoon after doing everything else.
No, it wasn't.
But we did it. And here we are.
And here we are. So
and
we're satisfied with that.
My spirits are high again.
Sure they are. Yeah. We're putting up a podcast studio. We haven't fished a whole lot. I think last time I fished was Christmas, and it was not good for me.
Yeah, I fished right about 2 weeks ago, and it was good for the soul, but it was not good for the catching. So things happen. Not everybody hits a home run every day.
It's not every day. That's for certain. Well, today we have a very special guest with us. We have the Chief of Fisheries here, Mr. Christian Waters. Christian, introduce yourself. Tell us all about you.
So I'm Christian Waters. I am the Chief of the Inland Fisheries Division for the Wildlife Resources Commission. It's a division that has about 70 employees, and our mission is to protect, conserve, manage freshwater fisheries resources, including fish, mussels, crayfish, and aquatic snails.
Got to always remember the snails.
Yes.
That's an addition. We got to remember the snails.
Right. So when you want to tell somebody how good of a job that Corey and I are doing, Christian is the guy you need to let know.
And if you want to tell somebody how bad a job we're doing, don't call Christian.
Just anybody that's not Christian.
That's not related to Christian. Yeah, that's right. But today we brought him in because Ben and I have been talking about regulations and rules that we have, because we get a lot of questions about that through the podcast and just in general, like when we meet people on the street or meet them at boat ramps, they talk about rules, talk about regulations and that kind of stuff. And there's not a person in this agency that knows more about rules and regulations. He knows more about rules and regulations that aren't even fish rules. Like, people come to him. I can tell you this because I work in the office with him, and we'll be doing something and somebody will come and the rule book is huge. I mean, because it's all of environmental laws and rules are in this book. It's not just the Wildlife Commission's book. But people come in and they'll lay the book in front of him and go, what does that mean? And it's not even a fish rule, so I will tell you, he has dedicated a lot of time and effort into understanding rules, understanding regulations, how they affect the public, how they should be interpreted, and how they should be enforced. And so that's why he's here today. Yeah, he's the rule genius.
He knows a lot about rules, how they're written, why they're written, the way they're written.
How to write them. I mean, there's a lot going on up here in this brain when it comes to rules.
There is an art to it.
See?
There is.
Did you hear?
Because I've tried, and I have submitted rules. I have submitted rules on some of them for me, some on behalf of our guys on the coast. Every one of them has been rewritten because I didn't do it right. And not that it's changed, but it's just the language is very specific.
Yeah, I mean, this tells you the process. You sent me a rule this year, right? You remember that rule? You sent me a rule proposal this year, and I was like, yeah, it's not even close. I was like, I got to rewrite it. So I rewrote it, And I'm pretty sure when it got to him, it got rewritten again because I don't even know all of the little bells and whistles that got to go in a rule.
Right.
So.
And it's not that it changed necessarily what the rule did.
No,
it's just
no.
how they have to be written.
Yeah.
So
The details,
right.
very detailed.
So I mean, you guys don't really care about the verbiage of the rules. That's not what we're here to talk about.
No,
but
no.
you know, we get a lot of questions about why is the rule this way, or why do we have, you know, a slot limit here and not a slot limit there? What is the process for rule? We get all those type of questions. And so as Corey and I were talking about ideas for this year on the podcast, because we know how deep into rulemaking and how experienced Christian is, we were like, he's got to be the guy we get on here. Otherwise, later he'll might give us some constructive criticism on how those rules actually happened.
He also allows us to do the podcast, so I thought it was a good idea to get him on the podcast so that he'd let us continue to do the podcast too.
I mean, y'all may remember
he's the keeper of the flame, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Y'all remember we had Cam on a year or two ago, and he was our director
at the time.
So the big boss, but our immediate boss is this fella right here.
Yeah.
Kind of.
So if we don't keep him happy, you know, no more podcasts. Just saying.
Or more podcasts, depending on.
Yeah, depends on what he's trying to do to us. Yeah, for sure. But
so before we get deep into that, Christian, what's it like to be fish chief? You know, there's maybe 50 of y'all in the country, if my math's right.
This is correct. Each state generally has a chief of fisheries. They go by different names, but that's what they are. And, you know, it's a cliche, but every day's different because every day there's a new topic. But generally speaking, I see my role as a coordinator, collaborator. You know, we have, as I mentioned earlier, we have a mission and we have a plan and a vision to try to implement that mission for the benefit of the citizens of North Carolina. And in doing that, my goal is to kind of make sure that all of our staff, all of our projects that have individual purposes are all pulling in the same direction, you know, and it also involves working with resource partners and working with the public and making sure that, you know, we're all moving in a direction that is good for the resources and good for the state.
Yeah, that's well said. I will say, having been here now a little over 3 years in the office, the position of being a chief is a busy one. He does not lack for work. He lacks for time. He needs about 3 of themselves, you know, to make it all happen. To be honest, it's a lot of work. People think that, you know, a lot of times we get that, you know, you get the comment of government work's kind of, you know, 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 or whatever the word is, and that's just not in the fish chief role. It just can't be done. It's a lot of hours put in, a lot of hours on the weekend. I mean, he's emailing people on the weekends when he's working, and a lot of travel that's involved. So it's an extensive job for sure.
Sure, and I mean, these guys do a lot administratively to kind of keep our wheels rolling. But what they do, you know, from my perspective, that really helps me a lot is they help me kind of think about different perspectives. And, well, you have to keep this in mind, and you have to keep this in mind. And this is, so they really help kind of redirect and recenter when I have discussions with them, because they see things from a different level than we do at the field. And it's, for me, it's incredibly helpful because, you know, we're trying to make it all happen, and you know there's a lot of moving parts, and from their perspective they get to see how these parts move a little bit better than some of us who were neck deep in just one thing. So
yeah, but it all works.
It does.
It all works. It takes every single one of us, takes all 70 employees in the division to make it all work, from the fish culturists and the hatchery managers to the field biologists to, you know, supervisors. It takes every single one of us to make it happen. And if we didn't have them all, I mean, it's still a struggle with 70 employees to get to everything. I mean, we can't get to everything, and that's just the truth.
So Christian, aside from working with Corey, what other challenges do you think are associated with this? Like, what are some of the tougher parts of your job?
I could answer that, thinking about things like water quality and sedimentation and aquatic nuisance species and habitat degradation that is occurring and aging of our reservoirs and the impact of that, and in some cases too many nutrients, and in some cases too few nutrients. All of those things are challenges that we deal with every day. But I really think, I've thought a lot about this. I really think, ultimately it's communications that's the big challenge. And in this day and age, there is so much information out there. Some of it correct and accurate, some of it not so accurate, some of it just slightly misinformed. It's not that it's really wrong, it's just misinformed. And so, that has been a challenge that ever since I came to Raleigh and Corey's come to Raleigh, that we've tried to work with. And I must say that this podcast has been a great tool in trying to address some of those type of issues. But I think that's where the real issue is trying to communicate and get the feedback too from the public.
Sure.
Oh yeah, I think I was really hoping you were gonna it could be water quality, it could be siltation, but it really actually is, Corey. That's the biggest hurdle for me. But I mean, that's true. We can talk more about it later, but I understand. I mean, I'm on the other side of that equation.
I can't say that out loud.
Right. Well, I know we're tracking. No, I think you're absolutely right. I think that we can have the best scientists in the world, and we pretty much do.
Yes.
But communicating that out there and getting that information in the hands of the public so it's in a palatable form so that they can understand it is really, a huge necessity for the agency this day and age. If you boil it down to something as simple as, pond management, I tell folks every day, you can go to a hardware store or anywhere where old men eat breakfast and you can hear 1,000 different theories on what's right.
Yeah.
Some of them are right, and some of them aren't, and some of them work in certain situations and not in others. And it's the same thing with all the information we have, is where one thing may work somewhere else, and the public can get convinced that that's the ticket everywhere, and every situation is a little bit different. So that communication part, explaining, well, this is the problem, this is how to address it, really is a huge hurdle that never really goes away, because as soon as we get one resolved, well, now we have this other issue. So.
Yeah, I think that was one of the impetus for this podcast, was to share the information. Obviously, we talked about on the podcast previously. You mentioned something about like not all the right information or misinformation. I think that's the thing that I struggle with personally when it comes to information is sometimes you're getting bits and pieces. It's like a rumor in an office building, right? It goes from one person to the next, and every time it changes, information. And reminds me of a MASH episode, but anyway, I'm a MASH nerd, where something happened and there was there was just a little snippet in there that was the truth, but the rest of it just kept gaining and got bigger. And recently we had something on social media where it was going around that our sister agency, Marine Fisheries, was going to do X, Y, and Z. And Marine Fisheries hadn't done any of that. And so Marine Fisheries is having a fight. Put out there, none of this is true. We didn't say any of this. And so I just would tell people to be careful. Like, if you see something, if it is not from an official website of ours or of another agency, then I call somebody, call one of us, get in contact with that agency and make sure that information is accurate, because a lot of people are using our logos and stealing stuff and making up things and putting it online, and then it spreads like wildfire, on social media, which, I know some of that
everybody loves a juicy rumor.
Oh yeah. And that's human nature, and it's been like that since the dawn of time, and I get that, and we can't fight all of that. But if you're sitting at home and you're looking at something, you're like, man, that seems weird, or man, I don't know if that's right or not, contact us directly and have that conversation. We're not going to lie to you. We're going to tell you exactly. Like if we lie to you and you catch us in a lie, then we are in trouble. Like we are in serious trouble. We're going to be in trouble as an agency. And so we're not going to do that. We're going to give you the information as we know it and give it to you. And I mean, that's just our jobs. And so I would encourage people to just contact us directly.
Yeah. And I'll add to that and just say that, the management, the sustaining, the enhancement, the maintaining of fisheries, requires everybody. Whether you're a fisherman or just a member of the general public, whether you're a legislator, whether you're a commissioner, whether you're a state employee, it requires everybody. And if everybody isn't informed with the appropriate information and back to what I said earlier, pulling in the same direction, then it becomes counterproductive.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge, I also am just interested, what's your favorite part of this job?
Me.
We've already ruled that out.
Okay.
Well, I'll say that's kind of true. That's sort of true. It's gonna be a little bit corny. I'll give you two answers. The first answer though, and I mean this, is being able to lead the division with 70 employees that are highly skilled, highly motivated, very dedicated, to a fault, and
except for Ben. Go ahead.
And the work that they do, it's just a privilege, and just I take a lot of pride in that.
Yeah.
And again, that may sound kind of corny, but that's big. And then, but really, what is the most important thing I think that I do engage in is the policy piece. And some of that's regulations, which we're going to talk more about, but then there's management decisions and things that all relate back to policy. And early on in my career, I was a biologist for many years, a research coordinator, collected a lot of data, science nerd, still am, but it doesn't matter how much data you collect and how accurate it is and how good it is if you don't put that into practice in the form of management and policy. What have you done? And so that's what I really like. And as both of you can attest, I'm willing to debate an issue from every single direction that is out there, trying to get to the best solution.
Yeah, I give you credit for that. You can debate anything into the ground. God bless you. I love you to death.
If you don't think it's been thought through,
yeah,
you might be wrong.
Yeah, as long as this man is chief, I will say this: if a decision comes out from the fish division, it has been thought through from 400 different angles. I can attribute that to him, because he definitely thinks about things, and he definitely tries to think about everything and everybody. Like you honestly think, well, how's that going to affect X, and how's that going to affect this person over here? And you think about all of those things, and I give you credit for that. Sometimes it drives me crazy, and I want to shoot you, but that's a whole nother story for another podcast.
Well, I'll just say that I think we all recognize that it's a tough job, and we realize that what you're doing for us is a big deal, and I just want to thank you, because I think you have done well by us for sure. So
it's not going to get you.
I'm towing that line.
Yeah, it's not going to get you a pay raise, but go ahead.
It ain't going to hurt me.
Well, no, it probably ain't going to hurt.
But
just don't lay it on so thick that he's like, he doesn't believe that.
I was trying to just kind of leave it, and now you're tearing it apart.
Okay,
so I don't know.
All
anyway,
right, well,
good job, boss.
Yeah,
Thank
there
you.
you go. See, that would have worked right there. Yeah, just good job, boss.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it, but we're not here to lay it on thick with the boss. I mean,
we've done that.
We might as well take advantage of it.
We've burned
I'm okay with
20
that.
minutes.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. We can keep going with that.
Accolade upon
The
accolade.
next podcast, 38 reasons why our boss is great.
Yeah.
I would listen.
Nice.
We're here to talk about regulations. So we get this question all the time. We have regulations at closed seasons, open seasons. We have regulations on creel limit, bag limits. There's probably several other aspects that I'm not even thinking about right now that we're regulating. Areas to fish, areas you can't fish. seasonalities even within that. So, you know, we get a lot of questions on that. But before we even do that, let's just, 1,000-foot view. What's the point of regulations?
So, I've said this a lot in my career. It's the saying, one bad apple spoils the bunch. And so, in a perfect world, we wouldn't need regulations. Everybody would understand what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, would do it the right way, and would consider their neighbor, their fellow angler, the future citizens of North Carolina as they participated in the fishery. But that doesn't happen. And that doesn't happen because some people just aren't going to follow the rules, and then, other people, just don't know. So there's a part of rules and rulemaking that is also education as much as it is, some form of enforcement or management of that kind. And so, ultimately, when you look at state law, what our commission is mandated to do, one of the key functions of their role is the rulemaking. They are the rulemaking body. And then what we do as staff is, we look out there and we see those management issues that need to be addressed. And if those management issues are related to an activity that may be done by the public, that's where rulemaking becomes important.
Right. So Corey's talked about the tragedy of commons in the past, and if you don't remember that or
blocked it out because I said it,
or just ignored it completely, which just can be a good move. Just Google that. But what I'll say in summary of that is there's not a single resource on this earth that's not finite. We have zero limitless resources. And anytime you take from a resource, you leave less for everybody else. And the more people that take from that resource, the less there is for everybody else. And even like a fishery that replenishes itself through reproduction, if there's too much take and not enough leaving, you wind up running out of that. And so in a nutshell, that's really the game that we're playing. And as we're getting more people, we're seeing less fish in some instances, where there's more people that are pulling from that resource all the time. And so that's really, in a nutshell, I think why we have to have regulations, is because it's not a cornucopia that's never ending. All of our resources, if we take too many, there's an end to it.
Yeah, I mean, we get these comments online a lot, which, you can take or leave Facebook, social media comments, because they are what they are, because, people hide behind the desk and say things that they want to say they probably wouldn't say to your face. Some of them might, but most of the time they won't. But we get a lot of comments if you read our Facebook pages and social media pages of, it's my God-given right. You shouldn't tell me what to do when it comes to a natural resource. I shouldn't have to pay, which that's a whole nother topic, but I shouldn't have to pay to utilize a natural resource, and, those kinds of things. And I would tell people that's not what human history would tell us. If you look at human history and you look at what humans do, humans take until it goes away. As you said, it's a finite resource.
I do, unfortunately.
I mean, it's human nature. There's if you read the Tragedy of the Commons and stuff like that, it's all about, Joe down the street had one and I wanted two, and then Joe said, you got two, I got three, and so forth and so on, and it just builds upon itself until the resource runs out. And we have examples of that in North Carolina when Europeans first came here, of animals that existed here that no longer exist here because we just took till there was no more. And so, I understand people feeling that way in some ways, because I'm libertarian at heart, probably, and some, not to bring politics into it, but I like people to leave me alone, so I get it.
He really does like people to leave him alone.
I do. They're both shaking their heads. Chris is shaking his head and he's agreeing. That's just the kind of guy I am. But, just human history tells us that, without some form of a box to put it in, so to speak, boundaries to put on it, it goes away. And we have a lot of examples of that over the 300-year history of Europeans, 400-year history of Europeans being here.
Yeah. So
blame it on the Europeans.
So that's kind of the 1,000-foot view of why we need regulation. Is that we'd like this resource, whatever it is, bass, shad, herring, muskies, mountain trout. You pick one. Deer.
Yeah, you pick an animal.
Raccoons. There's not as many people taking them anymore.
I don't know about trash pandas, but anyway.
But it's very popular on our Facebook.
Evidently, yes.
But what are the tools we use to regulate fisheries? Let's get a little down specifically.
Well, the main tools that we use with inland fisheries are size limits and creel limits. Those are the two big ones. And you're trying to harvest fish that have reached a certain size. That way they've maybe had a chance to reproduce, for example. Or in some cases, if it's a long-lived species, you may have a size limit that limits the number of larger fish you can take out of the population, for example. The creel limit's very important. Back to what you're talking about with the tragedy of commons, it's people, I don't think, some do, but not everyone just goes out there intentionally, saying, well, I need to get this fish, so, I need to get my fish so Corey doesn't get his fish.
Yeah.
But the result is, if you don't have a guideline there, you're going to take what you need. And if everybody takes what they need, in some cases,
we're out.
Yeah, that cumulative effect is too much.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, size and creel limits are big. Where we have to, closing a fishery or season is appropriate, and that can be based on a couple of different things. That can be based on the overall condition of the fishery and the opportunity to allow that fishery to recover, or it could be just simply a situation where those fish are vulnerable during spawning or nursery time periods or something like that. And then we also have some other rules that are in place that are just, for example, our prohibited species list.
Yeah, I was going to say prohibitions.
That are prohibitive in nature because they're something that would do harm and aren't for the common good, and so therefore, bringing that species, for example, into the state is kind of against the good of the public.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I didn't even think about prohibited species, but yeah, we don't want you to bring things that aren't native here.
Correct.
As we say, don't move fish. We say it all the time. But when I boil down things, our rules are really designed. Every fish has a certain growth rate that's predictable for that species, and a certain reproductive rate that is fairly predictable for that species. And if you're harvesting too many, you start to see changes in that growth rate or changes in the mortality that is unproductive and ultimately results in less spawning potential for that fish. So really, I tell folks coarsely, all we're trying to do is keep the fish reproducing and growing the way they are intended to, and that's what these rules are typically trying to do,
And the rules are really the only way we can manipulate angler behavior.
Yes.
That's the key, I think, that people don't understand, or maybe they do understand it and get it, but for me, it maybe took me a little while in the fisheries world to realize that, I'm trying to conserve the fish and I'm trying to conserve their habitats to make it all better, but truth be told, I'm really manipulating human behavior.
Yes.
Yes. That is a lot of our job. And that goes back to the communication and the education and all that kind of stuff that flows through that. But the rules are the one thing that we can go, all right, that if we do that, if everybody follows it, we've manipulated that behavior that will affect, in turn, make the fishery better in our minds. It should make the fishery better over the long term.
Yeah, I've said it multiple times. In terms of regulations on fish harvest, the only way that they work, if it's a culturally popular catch and release species,
yeah.
If we change the regulation in that particular circumstance, it likely will have no change.
Yeah, the classic example of that is largemouth bass.
Right. If it's a culturally important fish harvest species and we change the regulation still has to make you turn back a fish that you would have kept otherwise. So yeah. I don't know. If it's catfish and you typically keep 10 catfish a day and we make the creel limit 20 catfish a day, that regulation will have no impact whatsoever.
That's right.
But if you would normally keep 10 fish a day and we ask you to keep 7 fish a day, then that will likely cause a shift in the population. And so it seems punitive, and you could even interpret it that way.
Yeah.
But the motivation typically behind it is, okay, too many fish are being removed too quickly, and we need to slow that down.
Yeah.
And sometimes those ideas are not popular. Sometimes they're not even popular with us. And they're heavy and they're hard decisions.
Yeah, you use the word punitive, and I think that's the way the general public or most anglers probably view rules, is punitive. The further I've gone up the food chain, so to speak, in fish division, the more I feel that. I feel those public comments. I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel those public comments like we're taking something away from people. When I was a biologist, I'm like, well, I'm trying to make the fishery better, so that's why I put that rule forward, and that's exactly what our biologists are doing. But as I've become a supervisor and an assistant chief and work with you, those comments are more, I don't know, I don't take them personally, so to speak. Like, I'm not mad or angry or anything, but I really listen to those comments a whole lot more, because I'm trying to balance in my mind, all right, here's the biological side, but I'm also trying to figure out on the social side and the human side, is it the right thing to do as well? So I think that's really where rules are so nuanced.
Yeah, the social aspect is huge, and in many cases is probably equal to the biological aspect. And I would say that in some cases it's, there are some social norms that come into play, and to kind of maybe use a kind of an outrageous example is that, using dynamite to fish, for example. It may be that depending on where that would be allowed to do, harvest is harvest. It doesn't matter if you take it on a hook and line or you take it with dynamite. But the social norm is that the public and anglers don't want us allowing folks to use dynamite to take fish. So there are some social aspects like that where public input is very important that we take into case. But the punitive part, going back to that for a minute, the way I see it is if we're doing good management and we're doing good communications and we're working together and all pulling in the right direction and we're doing proactive, management, then those rules shouldn't be punitive. They should be, moving us in a direction that is where it needs to be. What ends up happening is when appropriate steps aren't taken, and then you're forced to take pretty drastic measures, that's when it really feels punitive.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't not argue against the fact that there is probably a little bit of it that is punitive in that sense. When you're at that point, having to react.
By the way, I just want a little snippet in here.
You want to get that dynamite thing in
Public
there?
service announcement. Dynamite's not allowed.
Yes, I use that as yes.
Just
Yeah, we're going to circle back to that later.
Circle back to that. It's a public service announcement. That is not an approved gear in North Carolina to harvest fish.
Yet.
Yes.
It's on the chief's mind. Just kidding. I would say that the fact that it feels punitive in like you said, I mean, I may not like it myself. I may want to do on my weekend. I may want to keep more fish than I'm allowed to. But the real understanding of that and the reason why we is a communication problem that we need to do. So we need to explain to you that, yes, I understand that it feels, to explain to our anglers, yes, we understand that it feels punitive. We're not trying to be punitive. We're trying to make sure that this resource is around years down the road. So while it feels that way, I think once you understand the motivation behind it, we're not just, evilly tapping on our desk. Well, the tapping now works great on this one, but we're not just sitting there trying to make your lives hard. We're trying to preserve this resource for the future, and understand those motivations. Sit down with your local biologist, ask them, say, hey, show me the data. Let me sit down with you and explain it to me. We don't have anybody on staff that is unwilling to do that. And if they do, you call me and we'll sit down and figure it all out together. So I think that's part of that thing is in a vacuum, if the rule goes from 5 to 4 and you don't know why, it absolutely seems punitive, But if the rule goes from 5 to 3 and you go, well, I'm really not catching as many fish as I used to, and it's really a lot harder to catch the fish that I do, and I'm also not seeing as many larger fish as I used to. Once you start to really think about what the changes that have taken place, it's not a popular idea, and I don't like it, but it is true, and nothing in this world stays the same all the time. It doesn't seem so.
Well, and I will say, from a public service announcement perspective, we joke around, the goal is more and bigger, and
doesn't happen. But anyway,
we know that's what anglers want, and that's our goal too.
Yeah.
Now, is that a true realistic goal?
Yeah.
But that's where we're trying to get is, we want people to be able to fish, and we want to be able to catch a good number of fish, and we want them to catch big fish.
And I would say, going back to what Ben said, a really good example of that is striped bass on the Roanoke River. We have struggled. I know you have struggled personally, but
that one hits me at all levels.
But we, as an agency, have struggled with that closure of that season because, one, socially, we know how popular it is amongst North Carolinians, people from outside North Carolina, and in particular, people from Northampton, Halifax, those counties in and around the Weldon area, and how economically important that fishery is to that local community as well. But, if everybody, that includes the biologists, and it took us a little while, and if the anglers could sit back and take a minute and be honest with themselves about what they're seeing on the river, what is it that I'm actually seeing? They would all admit, I think, that, okay, we're not seeing large females. We're not seeing large females. I'm pretty sure, it's greatly reduced. I'm not saying there's none, but it is greatly, greatly reduced. I mean, every sample that we've taken in the past 7 years has shown that those large females are not there anymore for the most part. And I would say anglers are seeing the exact same thing if they'd be honest about it, And I think that's the struggle with some of these rules, is if everybody would just take a second and think about what they're seeing, and going back to what you're saying, what am I actually seeing when I'm fishing? Okay, maybe on that one off day, I had 100 fish day at Roanoke, but what were their sizes? and what did they compose? What were they composed of? You know, was it all males? Was it, you know, a few female? You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And has that changed from a decade ago? Which it has. And you know, okay, there's 100 fish a day, but how many days did you go and you didn't catch anything? You know, and so those are the things that we get from anglers is, well, I'm catching this and I'm catching that. And I know you are. I'm not saying you're lying to us. That's not my point. But think about the overall like picture of the population in your mind as you fished it over the past whatever 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. If you're honest with yourself and you really think about it, you're like, okay, it is different, and that is what they're actually telling me. Because generally, our data pretty much, it might not match 1-to-1, but it's pretty close to 1-to-1 with what anglers see, because the fish are what the fish are, you know. And so there's a lot of times anglers see it faster than we do.
Sure.
You know, they're there quicker than we are. I mean, I've had that happen to me as a biologist, that people call me up and say, hey man, something's happened to the crappie population at Jordan Lake. I don't know what's going on. And I'm like, well, data last fall looked great. Well, between data last fall and the next fall, we had a massive kill that nobody knew about, you know, where they died off. And so things happen, you know, and I don't know, I'm rambling a little bit, but I just want people to really, you know, when a rule comes out, think about what that rule is trying to get you to do and talk to the biologist and be like, why did we have this rule?
Right.
You know, and once you have that conversation with the biologist, you're probably going to think back to your fishing experience and go, yeah, that kind of does make sense. Like, we're not doing these things in a vacuum, as I guess is my point. Is
Yeah.
We're really not, you know, and we'll talk, I guess we're going to talk about the process.
I'm about to talk about that.
Okay, if we talk about the process, you really know it's not done in a vacuum.
So,
And I just was going to add that, because I was thinking along the same lines as Corey was just then, but you know, and it's also not what you're just seeing right now, but you have to think back. You know, we as a fisheries profession, as anglers, you know, we've learned a lot of stuff over the last 50 years, or and longer.
Sure.
But you know, I'm thinking back to, you know, the 60s and 70s when fisheries management really kind of kicked off. You know, we know now that there are things that don't work, that we shouldn't try, you know, and so that's where I get to the point where, like with the Roanoke, when we see hopefully restoration of that population, I shouldn't use the word hopefully because we will. When we see restoration of that population, you know, we have to remember, okay, we can't just go right back to
The way it was.
And harvesting at the same level that we were, because we know there's going to be sporadic reproduction, and we know there are going to be hiccups along the way, and so, you know, we all need to learn from the past.
Agreed.
So, I mean, we already know, you know, Corey's a libertarian apparently, and he doesn't,
I wouldn't.
which lends towards
said that.
loose governmental control, right? And rules, our rule process is fairly complicated, and to be honest,
it's very cumbersome.
To be honest, it should be in some ways,
And it's meant to be.
because you know we got to take rules serious. We got to do them for the right reasons. We have to have critical thought about them. They have to be reviewed. You know, we need to get public comment, and so it is a very cumbersom process. But that's not necessarily because a rule has so many eyes on it, and there's so much involvement from different groups and people and everything, that tends to make us have rules that are necessary, not frivolous.
Yeah. And
it tends to make us really critically think about the rules that we do and how they impact everybody. So I'd like to take a little bit of time and say, okay, things have changed in whatever fishery. We realize that a rule needs to change. Walk us from start to finish and kind of give us the time frame as well about how these rules, how does something go from an idea that things need to change to physically, you know, harvesting more or less fish, because we don't always restrict. I think we dodged that bullet, but sometimes we open rules up, and a lot of people say that we haven't, But we have
And
we have several examples of where we said, you know what, we can have more harvest or less length limits, and so
Yeah.
it changes in both directions.
Or
But
something didn't work.
right.
and we just got rid of it.
Yeah.
So, but outline that process changes.
I think I'll start with part of it, and then I'll let you
Okay.
kind of finish it a little bit. But anybody can propose a rule. And when I say anybody, biologists, members of the public, commissioners, legislators, I mean, anybody. It is open. It is an open process. If you want to propose a rule, my suggestion to you is get in contact with your local biologist, and they will start you through that process of doing that. And when a proposal comes from the public, we evaluate it based on the data that we have, and we either move it forward in the process, or we're like, no, that's not the right thing to do. So anybody can propose a rule. I want everybody to understand that, because I don't think everybody does understand that.
No.
We're probably going to be flooded with rules now, but that's fine. I mean, that is a part of the process. It is meant to be an open process for anybody to be able to participate in. So that's the one thing I wanted to add before you started going down the road on the process. But what? You got this?
I'm gonna put not that you can't do that, and you absolutely can. But if you call your biologist and you start the process, if your biologist says, I'd like you to think about some data, I'd like you to see some data, and if he can show you that maybe that rule isn't the direction it needs to go, consider that, because again, we don't need frivolous rules. We don't need rules that are going to help. So, but that's where this starts. A lot of our rules start with an angler calling us.
Yes, and I'll add on to that you can do that. My suggestion is exactly what you just said. Like, work in cooperation with, like, you say, I'm seeing this, and the biologist says, I'm seeing this, and then you go, well, how about what do you think should be the rule change? Should there be a rule change, to make this better? And the biologists will kind of help you, through that process. So yes, you will have better success in a rule change by working with your local biologist than just cold stone, here it is, kind of thing. That may or may not work. I mean, you may be an absolute genius, probably not, because there's not that many of them in the world, but you may be an absolute genius and give us a rule, and we'll be like, that's the best rule we've ever seen, but maybe not.
So if you're a trophy bass guy, and I'm going to let Christian talk about the process after this, but if you're a trophy bass guy and you go to, let me think, somewhere where there's no trophy bass at the moment.
No trophy bass?
No trophy bass. Like no giant bass. If you want to catch a 20-pound bass.
At Lake Norman?
You're interested in catching a 20-pound bass at Lake Norman.
Yeah.
And you want to propose a rule that says, okay, bass over 15 pounds from Lake Norman can't be harvested. I mean, we can do that. It would be an exercise, but the biologist there will tell you that rule will have little to no impact on the number of 20-pound bass.
That's right.
And that's what I mean by you need to think about, well, is the goal of that rule actually achievable? And what would that rule do for us? So that's a little fantastic, but that's kind of what I meant by, not that, we discount everything, but you need to talk to your biologist about the data and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So. Now, process, sorry.
Yeah, so the process is an open process. It is cumbersome. I might say it's just very deliberate in the way that it's done. And then it's open. And so you need to have that open conversation with biologists, figure out what the right option is. And then once we have a proposal, I'll hit the milestones, because there's quite a few of them, and then we can decide how far in the details we want to go. But typically our annual rule cycle would start in the late summer, fall of the year, in terms of putting together proposals, internal proposals. Those internal proposals now may have been years in the making, based on conversations with the public and constituent groups or legislators or whatever may be the case. But once we get to the point where we have a proposal on paper. There's an internal discussion about it that involves everyone from our director's office down to field staff. That discussion, once we decide that, okay, this is a proposal that needs to be considered for rulemaking, that's when we engage with our commissioners. Because as I mentioned before, our commissioners, they're actually the rulemaking body. We're just here to support them. Yeah. So we provide initially those proposals to committees, to the committee, the expert committees, if you will, from the standpoint of if it's a fisheries proposal, it would go before fisheries. If it's a gear proposal, it would go before the big game committee. Yeah. You know, and they review it from a conceptual concept standpoint, ask questions, try to think through the options. From there, at the next step, it would go to commissioners again. It's the rules committee. The rules committee is looking at it from the perspective of, you know, is the rule text, the technical rule text, following what needs to be followed? Is it doing what we're actually trying to accomplish? And then from there, it goes to the full commission, and the full commission will consider those proposals and decide which proposals have merit to truly go forward and go forward for public input. And that's what we call notice of text. And at that point, we notice text. Once we notice text, that starts a 60-day comment period. And within those 60-day comment period, we will have at least one public hearing. Yeah. But the public comment period is open typically online, multiple ways in which we gather input. That input's then reviewed and compiled and shared with commissioners. And we do that in a couple of different ways. We provide them a summary, and oftentimes that's what the public is familiar with, but we also provide them the raw comment data as well. So they see the specific comment data, and they take all that into consideration. We as staff take that into consideration. At times we may need to adjust our rule because of public input one way or the other. That's when we finally take it to our commission for adoption. That step's called the final text, where at that point we are providing them the specific text that will be adopted to be the new rule or the new regulation. And they adopt it. That's not the end of the process. Once they adopt it, you know, based on the Administrative Procedures Act, which is a law that stipulates how rulemaking has to happen, we file it with the Office of Administrative Hearings, and then you have a separate commission, the Rules Review Commission, which will actually review the rule to ensure that we have followed the process, that we are putting forward a rule that is they don't really look at the need for the rule or the justification for the rule. They're really looking to make sure we follow the process, the rule is clear, the rule doesn't conflict with other rules that are on the books, and it goes through the rules review process. And then once the rules review process goes through, then it can, and they approve it, then it will be codified in the North Carolina Administrative Code, and then it's a formal rule at that point. And most of our rules, we set an effective date of August 1 of a given year. That's because that we will take that information and put it in our Regulations Digest, which is the way, no pun intended, but that's the way the public digests that information. But if you want to see the actual rule, then you can, if you search North Carolina Administrative Code, you can see the actual rule text, the legal rule text as it is written. Those are the major milestones. I don't know what I may have missed or what questions you may have.
No, that's
I don't know what you missed.
No, but I mean, I knew all that, but it's good for the public to understand. It is a very deliberate process. The one thing I'd add to what you said is that the public comments are very important.
Yes.
Our commissioners read those comments staff read those comments. Like you mentioned, it can manipulate the rule. Like it can, okay, that makes a little more sense what they're saying over here. They've seen something that we haven't, and so it can also make the rule fail. Like if there's enough, disagreement about the rule, and it's legitimate. It's not just I'm over here in my corner throwing a temper tantrum because I didn't get my way, so to speak. But if it's like literally the public is like, okay, this doesn't make sense because of this, and this doesn't make sense because there's reasons why that the public's giving that. I have seen, and you have seen commissioners go, we're not moving forward that rule. We're going to wait and go back and look at the data some more and figure out if there's a different approach than what this is, and so that rule won't move forward. So I have seen that happen for sure from public comment.
Absolutely, and that goes back to the social aspect of what we were talking about before. There are instances where we are pushed in a corner, so to speak. With trout waters, for example. Yeah. If there's a situation where there's private land adjacent to it and it's posted against trespass, that's the right of the landowner, and that's not something that we as a commission have the ability to second guess, if you will.
Sure.
And so, there are instances where we put rules forward if a population is in poor enough condition that that it requires a closure or something like that, or it's a new species that is found to be detrimental that has the potential to be introduced into North Carolina. There are certain rules where there's not a lot of wiggle room, but the majority of our rules, we want to balance the social aspect with the biology.
Yeah, for sure. What else about rules, boss man?
Well, there's a couple things,
okay,
and then we got to get to questions.
Yeah.
But
maybe we'll shorten questions. Maybe go to one or
right.
Something like that.
But I definitely want to just outline the fact that we make rules. We have some rules. We have rules that come down from legislation that just truly came from legislation, And then there's also local laws that some of the counties have. So there's maybe more than one way that things are being regulated, and some of those don't necessarily involve our process, but you will still get a blue light special if you violate them.
There's general statutes which come from the legislature, which we don't have anything to do, and then there's rules that we make, which is in the North Carolina Administrative Code. So that's different, and we do have the ability to manipulate those, like you said. And then there's county laws that we don't have any input in, really, for the most part. And there's not that many county laws, at least on the fish side. On the fish side, there's not that many county laws. There's a few, but not a terrible amount. A good example of a general statute is mandatory harvest reporting.
Yeah.
That's coming out with us and the Division of Marine Fisheries. That is a legislative mandate that we are having to implement. We did not come up with that rule, but we're having to implement that legislation, so to speak. So yeah.
Two quick clarifications I'll add there is that so rulemaking is something that is given to us by the legislature.
Yeah.
And so we have general statutes that give us the ability to do general rulemaking as it relates to the management of fish species, for example, size and creel limits. But then we also have legislation. Mandatory reporting is a good example where it says we will do it. It gives us guidelines of what the minimum we have to do, but then it gives us the authority to do rulemaking to actually implement it. And so most of the general statutes, ultimately give us the authority to do, or not us, the commission to do rulemaking.
Yeah.
The other thing I will say is that, just for clarification, county laws are still passed by the General Assembly.
That's right.
Those are state laws. They're just specific to a given county.
That's correct.
I think that's a misnomer. Some people think that a local county is passing a law. That does not happen. It is passed by the General Assembly. State legislature is the ones that are passing those laws. They're just specific to a given county.
That's why it's here.
That's a good distinction.
Yeah, that's why it's here.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, they're called local laws, but they really aren't.
They're and which is very different than, say, a county ordinance or
Right.
city ordinance or something like that.
Yeah.
Which there are some city ordinances.
Yes.
I left that one off the list, but
Yes.
we have had in the past, cities ask, for municipal water bodies, and I've said, well, we're not going to do that, but if you want to pass a city ordinance to do X, Y, or Z, that's under y'all's authority to do so.
And that's truly at the local level.
Yeah. Then the only other distinction I wanted to make is that we have a jurisdiction and our laws apply within that jurisdiction. Now, that might be its own podcast at some point,
Probably.
but it is a distinction that, we inland game fish are under our purview and inland waters coarsely are under our purview. Now that I've said that, Christian will clarify that even further, more than likely.
Yes, and trying to figure out or think about how to even approach that, because it is quite complicated.
Mm-hmm.
But thinking about that, going back to the statutes gives us specific authority to do rulemaking on certain items. At the same time, legislation has given other bodies rulemaking authority over other topics. For example, the Environmental Management Commission, which is a separate commission, has the authority to do rulemaking over water quality. So while water quality is very important to the Wildlife Resources Commission, and as we've said, water quality is very important to fish. I think y'all know this multiple times.
Fish need water.
Fish need water.
He does listen. Listen to that.
Yeah. So, but it's not under our authority to regulate, say, sedimentation or dissolved oxygen levels or, even fish kills. That authority has been given elsewhere. And so there's multiple other agencies that do rulemaking. The obvious one that is our sister agency is the Marine Fisheries Commission. And there's a distinct jurisdiction in the sense that there are coastal waters that they have authority in. There are inland waters where we have sole authority. And then in some places there are joint waters where we share authority. So there is shared authority. And then the other thing that I'd be remiss without saying is that you also have federal jurisdiction in some
Sure.
places where you have national forests or you have the Army Corps lakes. And so while they may not be implementing rules that are specific to fish and wildlife, that would still fall to us. There may be things that they regulate in terms of, say, access that would play into that role.
Yeah, I think jurisdiction is its own.
It's an own thing.
I mean, but I did want to just throw that out there that there's places where we can control, and then there's other places where it's not our job, so to speak. So
And it never hurts for the public to ask us.
Yeah.
We're willing to answer the question, but I've talked to a number of folks over time that have been frustrated because they've said, well, why aren't you doing something about the sedimentation in, High Rock Lake or whatever? And the truth is, we can advocate for it, and we do advocate for it, and we do comment on it, and we do talk to our colleagues in other agencies, but our commission doesn't have that authority.
Yeah. Sometimes we just can't because we don't have the power to.
The one thing about our agency, in my mind, is that we are, even though we do struggle at times with communicating with the public and that kind of thing, we are a very public-facing agency. In that we have enforcement officers that wear that diamond. That diamond's kind of everywhere. It's at our access areas. It's so everybody kind of knows about the Wildlife Commission that's in the outdoor world, but we get lumped in with a lot of things that are outdoors that are not us. With the public, like the public just says, well, that's got to be you because you're outdoors. And the truth of the matter is the legislature never gave us that authority. That's some other group of people that has that authority. It's not us. And so that's a very good distinction, Christian, for sure. What else about rules? before we go to questions?
I think it's time to go to questions.
You good with where you are? You said all you wanted to say. Well, I know you ain't said all you wanted to say, but are you good enough to keep on going?
I think it's probably time to move on to questions. I will say, once again, rulemaking process is its own beast, and if anybody has questions or concerns about it, reach out to local biologists or reach out to us in the Raleigh office.
Yeah.
It's open book. We'll discuss it with you.
Yeah.
And try to work through it.
The one thing that we didn't say that I will add about the process is a timeline. It's about 2 years, roughly. It might be even a little longer than that now. From the time an idea is originated on paper, a proposal, to the time it gets implemented on August the 1st. It's about a 2-year process, maybe 18 months.
Yeah, I'd say
18 months to 2 years, somewhere in that range.
From the point that we have a proposal written on paper to implementation is about 18 months.
Yeah.
But you got to realize that proposal on paper likely took who knows how long to get
to that point.
to the paper.
Yeah, and so I just want people. It is very deliberate, and it's meant to be. It is meant to be deliberate to make everybody stop and think. And because you are implementing the rule.
Sorry to carry on, but the one thing I'll mention on top.
It wouldn't be a podcast with you without you doing that.
I know, but
You the boss. You boss as long as you want to.
Yeah. But people can give us ugly looks and all, but you're in charge here, so who cares?
The one other piece of rulemaking that is different, not different, but just on a different time scale, is temporary rulemaking. Yeah. And people will see us from time to time do temporary rulemaking where we need to put something in place sooner, and it's on a shortened time limit.
Yeah,
I won't get into that process, but when we do temporary rules, it still has public input. It still has to work through our commission. Yeah. It's even a temporary rulemaking process is probably a 3-month process at best, probably longer depending on what it is. And then that's only in place for about 9 months. And unless it goes away unless it's replaced by a permanent rule.
Yeah.
And so,
and that's we don't do that often. We've done it. I mean, we've done it since I've been here.
Yes.
But we try not to do that. That's the one thing we try not. We try to do it by the original process because that's the way it was. I mean, there's temporary rules for a reason, but that was the way it was intended. Was the original process in my mind. But anyway.
Yeah.
Question time.
Yeah, this has been great. This has been, really interesting conversation. We haven't covered everything, but we've covered a big chunk of it.
Yeah, if we hadn't covered it all, you write us at where?
Two Bald Biologists at ncwildlife.org.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, now that we got video.
We got video. We can show y'all some swag.
So if you do send in questions, we got all kinds of things to show here. I'm gonna give some to Christian here. Christian, you hold up a couple. You get a choice of a hat that you can get. Ben, you'd look good in this. I think this is
my color.
This is called coral.
That is my daughter's color for sure.
But I think you'd look good in that coral.
Yeah.
My son would wear that coral in a heartbeat. Yeah, he likes pink.
Pull it off.
Yeah, he can pull it off. I can't pull it off, but he can. You get baits from us. We got 3 different types of baits here. We got, let's see, that's, I'll let you hold that. That's
and these are unique to us.
Unique to us. That's Carolina Sunrise over there, and this is Game Changer here, and this is the original, the OG Curse Breaker here, which is Ben's favorite, by the way, because he designed it. That's why it's his favorite.
It's a mean joker.
It is a mean joker. Catches quite a bit of fish, so there's baits involved, and let's see, you'll get a decal with our ugly face on it. My ugly
it's been
face.
Cleaned up.
Yeah, it's been cleaned up.
You don't get the ugly part.
You get decals, and then finally you'll get a shirt. I'll drop the box here. You'll get a shirt.
While supplies last.
While supplies last, you'll get a shirt.
And we have your size.
With our ugly faces as well. Man, we put our faces on everything. That's kind of weird. But anyway, that's the prize pack. So
who knew that our face would be something that we'd go with?
Never dreamed.
I'm not sure that was the right marketing approach, but
it's worked.
It's worked so far.
So anyway, if you send us questions and we use it, we will send you a prize pack.
Yeah. So we take our question, the guys and gals who send us questions. Each month, one of you will be selected for a prize pack, and you'll get a goodie box in the mail. You'll likely get an email from me saying, you know, I need your address, I need your shirt size. If you give me that when you send the question, I won't need that. If you don't give me that, no prize back.
Yeah, and send what color hat you want too.
Yeah, as long as we got them,
as long as we got them, I'll send it.
Try to tailor it to you as best we can.
We'll try our best.
So Mr. Stevens sent me an email, and we got, as we've talked about on the podcast and at great length with many of the things the state's put out recently, there's been significant changes in the mountain trout fishery as a result of Hurricane Helene. And, you know, there's been all these strategies, and we've shared a lot of them with the damage to our hatchery and the impacts that has had to our production. He's asked, you know, why wouldn't we just stock more fingerlings everywhere instead of what we're typically doing?
Well, that's not really I'll let you chime in too if you want to, Christian, for sure. That's not really the focus of our...
Not everywhere, but in the places where we've been stocking, why not just seed it out better, I guess is where he's going with that.
Well, so the Public Mountain Trout Water Program, particularly our stocked trout water program, is not most of our sites, not all of them, but a lot of our sites is not conducive for trout year round.
Sure.
They are actually located in places that during the summertime trout will not survive or will struggle to survive. So if you're putting out a fingerling, you have this approach that fish is going to grow up, get bigger, and one day will be caught. And that's not really the focus of the Public Mountain Trout Water Program, at least on the stocking side. So the harvest, my brain just went dead. Hatchery supported waters or the delayed harvest waters. That's not the focus. The focus of that is those are what we call put and take fisheries, in that we grow them up to the size that you will be ready to take them when you go out and participate in that. So if you're stocking fingerlings, you have this dream that they're going to get bigger somewhere else. And every fish that we stock is sterile. So it's not like we're Johnny Appleseeding the trout stream so that other trout will be reproduced and grow. That's not what we do.
The goal is more opportunity than it is restoration.
It's about opportunity and not restoration. Now, restoration is a totally different subject, you know, and that's not the focus of that part of the program, of our stocking program. You know, we will have staff go out and look at brook trout streams and wild trout streams and even delayed harvest and hatchery supported streams, and see what's going on and see what the populations are doing. And if there needs to be restoration on a brook trout stream or maybe even on a wild trout stream at some level, you know, then we'll address that as we see it. As we mentioned in the previous podcast, you know, fish in general will be there. Even after all this devastation, there's going to be fish there. In wild trout streams, there's going to be wild trout there that will be able to, you know, reproduce. And usually those spawns, as we mentioned in the previous podcast, will be bang up spawns. I mean, they'll be great. And those fish that come out of that will be pretty tough and grow pretty fast, usually. So, but we're tracking all that. So that would be my answer to him, I guess.
No, you did good. And that's what I said. You probably fleshed it out a little better than me. But I said our guys are going to be out. They're going to be surveying the population, and they're making prescriptions based on the impacts and in terms of trying to get fisheries back. But a lot of these trout streams, as you said, they're not going to grow the way we'd like for them to if we stock them at fingerlings. But they may die out. They may not make it at all. So
yeah, and can I quickly add that we've learned from the past.
Yeah,
we've done that in the past. We've stocked fingerlings in the past. In fact, we were stocking fingerlings up till probably 10 plus years ago when I first came to the Raleigh office. And but we did that hatchery supported in some areas where we stocked smaller fish with the hopes that they would grow and produce a fishery. They may have survived, but they certainly didn't grow in the wild like we would have wanted them to. So again, it's based on experience that we've tried, and it hasn't worked in our waters.
I'm gonna add one more thing to that is our hatchery program is hugely successful, and it seems to work, and it seems to work for the lion's share of our fishermen. The goal is to get back to that as soon as possible, and that's, it's not going to be a day, but that's what we're trying to get back to. And if we seed out all of our fingerlings, we're not growing them out to get back to normal as soon as possible either.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
the next one's easy. You're going to like it.
This is our last one of the day.
And this is our last one of the day.
I'm tired. Mission's exhausted me.
Mr. Bud is going to be our winner. So, Mr. Bud,
congratulations to Mr. Bud.
I need your address and shirt size. I'll send you an email later today.
And if you'd like the seafoam hat, we'd be glad to get it to you.
Right.
If that's your color.
Yeah, or someone special to use color. You could use these for birthday presents.
Yeah.
Save you some coin.
That's right.
He said he listened to us and he was very surprised to find out. I don't think he's actually done it, but he was very surprised to find out that if he goes and buys minnows, that he should not release them at the end of his trip. And so he was basically just asking for clarification. If I buy live minnows from a bait store, should I not dump them into the lake when I'm done fishing?
You should not.
You should not.
It is a blue light special to start with. There is a rule against it, and that is to prevent you from dumping an organism that could potentially be hazardous to the lake into the water. So it is illegal. We've talked about that and the reasons why. We talk about not moving fish all the time. And sometimes there's things in your bucket that you don't even know that's in there.
It could be, the craziest thing is it could be a zooplankton that we don't want in our system.
Exactly.
It could be crawfish larvae that we don't want in our system.
That's right.
It could be, you may have bought a golden shiners, but there may be a different fish species in there that's not native to this area that could cause problems. So it's illegal first and foremost, but the reason why it's illegal is because it could be an inadvertent introduction that can wreak havoc on our system.
Yeah, I know it's counterintuitive, I think is the right word I'm trying to say, for anglers in general to throw their bait, in the woods and let them die, so to speak, or dispatch them in some way. That's kind of a weird thing. I'll admit, as a young child growing up, pretty sure we dumped our bait in the water, not knowing that was the wrong thing to do, when I was a young child. So, yeah, I get that that's what anglers have done forever, but please stop doing that, because we've learned that when you do that, things magically appear in our lakes and streams that we don't want.
Yeah, so do not release anything unless you got that fish from that water.
Yep, that's different.
Don't put it back.
Yeah, if you went out and you caught it in a cast net and you're on that body of water and you release it at the end of the day, I'm good with that, and that's legal. But yeah, if you got it from somewhere else, by all means, do not release it in the lake.
Right.
All right. Well, is that it?
That's what I got.
All right. Well, that's great. Well, Christian, we really do appreciate you being here. We appreciate you being the chief, even though I probably don't say that enough. Give you too part of the time. Well, it's been another good one. Appreciate you, Ben. We'll talk to y'all soon.
Thanks, guys.